The regime comes down on them, beating them up and getting all these goons to repress them.
Communism in the crosshairs. The congressman is here to weigh in.
I am the victim of digital hacking, cyber stalking.
A South Florida senator fights back and walks out.
You can see what was inside.
Delivered before dawn packages of hate speech.
Ongoing white supremacist rhetoric. Their message is quite vile, actually.
It's fresh, it's nice.
And the coldest day in a decade, prompting a falling iguana warning.
It's all live this week in South Florida.
Good morning. Glad you could join us on this wintry morning. I'm Michael Putney.
I'm Glenna Milberg. We begin with the South Florida congressman finishing his first term and headed to November with no official opponent. This week, Congressman Carlos Gimenez and his South Florida colleagues held an event to unveil a bill to combat communism.
And Congressman Gimenez is a sponsor of that bill. He joins us now live by way of Zoom. Congressman, good morning. Great to have you on the show. How are you?
Great to be here. By the way, congratulations, Glenna, on your Emmy.
Thank you, sir.
Congressman, let me begin with a strictly political question. As Glenna said at the outset, you are running for re-election, and no Democrat has announced that he or she is going to run against you in November. Now, is that because of the sterling job you're doing, or because the Democrats have a weak bench, or because President Biden's approval ratings are in the 30s and the prospects for Democrats is just pretty dismal? What's going on there?
I think you answered it, all three. So I think I'm doing a good job. When I'm in the stores and people come up to me and say you're doing a great job, and I'm very humbled by that. I'm humbled by the fact that I represent Florida's 26th congressional district. It's a great honor to be a congressperson. I think the Democrats do have a very weak bench down here in South Florida in particular, and Florida in general. And also, President Biden's approval ratings are in the tank. And then everything that he touches, everything that the Democrats, look, everything I said the Democrats were going to do, they're doing. And everything that they're doing is not working. It's actually hurting America. And so the American people have woken up to the fact that they have an inept president, an incompetent administration, that everything they touch basically it doesn't turn to gold. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, Congressman, let me just jump in and say, since no Democrat is present, that the growth rate of the economy over the last year, we just found out on Friday, was 5.8%. Now, that's a record. Haven't had that in a couple of decades. So,
sure.
and unemployment is 3.9%. Some things are going well, aren't they?
Yeah, except that the unemployment is 3.9%, but there are 10 million jobs opening, which means that there are a lot of Americans not even looking for a job, which presses down that unemployment rate. Inflation is at a 40-year high. Gas prices are over 100% higher than when they took over. Joe Biden closed our pipeline, the XL pipeline, and then allowed Putin to go and open his pipeline. Putin is now threatening the Ukraine. Look, things just aren't going well, and people know it. The border is it's not a mess. It is a disaster. Over 2 million encounters that we've had, in the last year. And those are the encounters, the people we actually know that are crossing the border. They're flouting the law. People are being sent all over this country. No vaccines, no tests to determine if they have COVID or not. And yet, you and I, according to Biden, we have to wear masks and we have to have a vaccine, passport to go into a restaurant. But if you cross the southern border, that's not the case. Look, the American people have seen what's going on. It's a disaster, unmitigated disaster. And the growth rate is due to the fact that we had such a slowdown in the economy due to COVID-19. It's bound to rebound. And thank God that we're rebounding now, but not at the way it should be.
So, Congressman, economy, inflation, to your point, these are on top of everybody's minds right now. I want to take you to sort of your news of the week, because you were here unveiling a bill, and it wasn't about the economy and it wasn't about inflation. It was about combating communism. So the bill that you had announced with your South Florida colleagues was a bill that will create it's just kind of a one-liner. It'll create a State Department envoy especially to combat communism. Why is that needed now? What does that do that the State Department and USAID and the administration doesn't do right now?
It focuses the administration, it focuses the State Department, has one individual focused in on what communism, socialism, authoritarianism regimes are doing around the world to try to help the people, freedom-loving people of the world, to throw the yoke off of them in places like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and other places. And also, it puts an emphasis, hopefully, on our own hemisphere. There are things happening in our hemisphere which are rather troubling to me. We have leading in the polls in Colombia, a very stable democracy for many, many years. Somebody who was a member of M19 guerrilla group, who we believe is a Marxist. And are they going to be following the Maduro blueprint? Because Maduro is pumping millions of dollars into that election, hopefully to find an ally, and then maybe, just maybe, change Colombia into Venezuela. We need to be cognizant of what's happening around the world, but especially in our own hemisphere.
Of course,
and so it's there to put that emphasis on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the question is, you remember, was it last month there was the Biden administration convened world leaders, talked about more than $400 million to especially address exactly those things that create that atmosphere: corruption and poverty, crime. So I guess the question is, what will a special envoy do that is not being done right now?
It puts an emphasis on it. It puts somebody specially focused on that, and also somebody that can have the ear of the president. Will this president actually listen to that envoy? I doubt it. Just like he didn't listen to his generals in Afghanistan. And so this is being put forward now. I don't think it's going to hit the floor because obviously we're in the minority. But next year, hopefully, when we're in the majority, it'll be put on the floor, debated, hopefully passed, and then passed by the Senate. Then we'll see what the president of the United States is going to do with that piece of legislation. Will he veto it or will he accept it? And then once he accepts it, if he accepts it, will he actually listen to the special envoy telling him about threats to democracy, especially in our hemisphere? And that's really what this is all about. This is not a cure-all. It's just a step in the right direction. Obviously, we need to do a lot more things in our own hemisphere and a lot more things to combat the threat of socialism and communism around the world and in our hemisphere, especially in our hemisphere. And by the way, that's not the only bill that I've introduced. I've introduced a whole bunch of other bills that have to deal with the economy or supply chain. And this is just one of the bills that I've introduced.
You have, and just for the record, we just do the topical news of the week. That's why we brought this one
right
up. Michael.
Okay, no problem.
Congressman, let's talk about communism close to home in Cuba. Right now, I think the Diaz-Canel regime is conducting these show trials for nearly 800 men, women, and children who were arrested after the July 7th, 11th insurrection, the rebellion in the streets, which were largely peaceful. And what is the United States doing, or what can the United States do to react against this terrible act of repression?
Well, I think that the United States can impose harsher restrictions, harsher sanctions on the Cuban regime. We certainly can do what we've been asking for, since July, restore free access to internet for the Cuban people so that they can communicate amongst themselves and communicate to the rest of the world about what's actually happening in Cuba. They put in jail one of the writers of that song that won two Grammys, Patria Vida. Actually, one of them is in jail right now simply for writing a song, asking for freedom. And that's all the people of Cuba asked for: freedom. They weren't asking for anything else, and they went to the street, spontaneous demonstrations. And then what do you get? No violence, nothing. It's just asking for freedom. This is what you get. You get put in jail and put on trial. And so, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about totalitarian regimes, and then how they oppress the people and how they're oppressing the people of this hemisphere. The United States needs to be the leader. We need to be that beacon of hope. We need to take steps to assure that at least in this hemisphere. Okay, this is the hemisphere of democracy. Unfortunately, it may be going the other way with some of the elections. And by the way, these totalitarian regimes, they're using democracy against democracy. Look what happened in Venezuela. Chavez was elected democratically, and yet he went in and changed the Constitution, also changed the makeup of the Supreme Court, their Supreme Court, where they got 45,000 verdicts in favor of the government. And that's what they're doing. This is the new playbook for communist and totalitarian regimes. They're using democracy against itself to create these regimes that then are self-perpetuating.
Well, we understand they are Potemkin democracies. They don't really exist in the way that we in Western Europe, Scandinavia, a lot of the world. Well, we need to take a break, Congressman. Sure. Stay with us. We'll be right back. On this chilly Sunday, we are speaking with U.S. Congressman Carlos Gimenez, who is joining us by Zoom. Congressman, the world right now is on the precipice of maybe the first major shooting war in decades as these Russian troops are surrounding all the borders of Ukraine. Experts say that once the ground is totally frozen, maybe in a week or two, when the Russian tanks and troops could move in more easily, that in fact Russia is going to invade Ukraine. What is your opinion of the job the Biden administration has been doing to try to halt that or to discourage Putin from doing that? And what would you like to see President Biden do?
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing that I'd like to see him do is supply more lethality to the Ukrainians so that they can protect themselves against this onslaught if it comes. It's also to serve as a deterrent so that it doesn't come. First thing he did, though, I mean, back in when he took office, and then he killed our pipeline, and then he allowed Putin to build his pipeline. And so you could have used that as a weapon. You could have used energy as a chip, but he gave away that chip. He gave away that chip right off the bat without even starting the play. And that's the problem with President Biden. He's just wrong. He's wrong all the time. He doesn't understand, the dynamics of it. He is destroying our energy industry while allowing the Russian energy industry, which in turn funds the Russian military, to thrive. And so that's one of the things that I would use. I'd tell Putin, hey, go ahead. If you want to do that, we're going to help the Ukrainians defend themselves. But in the end, if you do, the sanctions are going to be severe. That pipeline, we're going to sanction it again, and we're going to start our own production, and we're going to drive your energy production into the ground. That's exactly what Reagan did back in the 80s when he ramped up our military spending, and he basically spent the Soviet Union into the ground. They couldn't keep up with us. They can't keep up with us on this either. But Biden has already given that up because he is heck bent on destroying our energy industry here in the United States, which, by the way, produces energy 20% cleaner than other places in the world. So we produce the cleanest energy, and yet we want to destroy ours and then ask OPEC to pump more because we need more gas in the United States. We were almost, if not totally, energy independent before President Biden came in, and now we're not. Well, thank you again, President Biden. President Biden again, just doesn't understand. He makes the wrong choices for the American people, actually putting us in danger because you're right. We are close to having an all-out shooting war in Europe, something which we haven't had in decades.
Congressman, I want to go back to something that you said before relative to Cuba and the political prisoners and the focus, at least in this country for 5 decades now, on the need for free and fair elections there, one of the components of what would be a free Cuba. I want to sort of launch from that into, in the House vote on the Voting Rights Act, you voted against the U.S. Voting Rights Act. Why? Why?
Because it's a farce. I mean, you've got elections need to be fair and verifiable, and those that are eligible to vote should vote. We have the freest elections in the world. We have early voting. We have absentee ballots. Day of voting with over 800 places where you can go. That Voting Rights Act is not really a Voting Rights Act. It would have opened the door for all kinds of shenanigans to happen. And so I don't think
what kind of shenanigans.
Well, let's say you're putting ballot boxes all over the place and they're not being guarded by anybody, which is what happened in Georgia. Well, what's to stop somebody from going in and stealing all those ballot boxes in heavily Democrat area or heavily Republican area? How about counting votes after the election is over? All right. That's ridiculous. That way, hey, we need to find 30,000 votes here. Let's go find 30,000 votes somewhere. It's just asking for trouble. The way we hold elections here in Florida should be the model for the rest of the nation. But it's up to the state legislators to determine the means and methods of their elections in their states. That's what's in the Constitution. This should not be a federal takeover of election laws around the nation.
Yeah, well, in fact, Congressman, the Constitution clearly says that Congress has the supreme right to set the rules, regulations, and laws regarding elections. And I think what the Democrats say they want is some uniformity and also to make voting easier and not to put barriers in the way, especially of minority voters.
Well, like what barriers are there to people getting to voting? I mean, we have 14 days of early voting. You have 30 in Miami-Dade County. You have 33 different polling places. You can request an absentee ballot, which will be mailed to you a month before the election is over. You just need to get it in by 7 o'clock on election day. We count the votes as they come in. You get the results really, really quickly. And you know what? Nobody said a word about it. The places that are most restrictive happen to be the blue states. All right, the place where the president comes from. Okay, and so they don't have the same kind of rules as they even have in Georgia, for God's sakes. And so look. It's really, it says voting rights bill, but it's not. And what we need to have are equitable laws, fair laws that allow you to vote. There is no restrictions on voting here. I don't know of any place that they restrict anybody on voting. And you have, at least in this state, you have over a month to get your vote in. I think the whole argument is ridiculous.
Carlos Gimenez, Congressman from Miami, we just never have enough time with you ever. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, and I enjoy the back and forth with you guys too, so whenever you want me back, I'll be back.
Deal.
Congressman, thank you. And if you played golf, as I know you love to do, early Sunday mornings at the Biltmore, I guess you wore your gloves today.
Oh, I didn't play today. It was a little too cold for me, even for me. Today.
Even for you.
Even for me. So tomorrow, next Sunday, I'll probably be out there as long as it's not 35 degrees.
Okay.
No falling iguanas.
All right, Congressman, hit them long and straight. Thank you very much.
Up next, from cyber stealing personal posts to the state surgeon general, one state senator led several fights this week.
You're going to hear from Lauren Book when we come back.
A bit of drama upended the typically reserved state committee meetings this week when Democrats walked out during questioning of Florida Surgeon General.
They sure did. State Senator Lauren Book of Plantation is the Senate Democratic leader, and she led that walkout. Late this week, I spoke with her about it and about an extortion plot against her involving nude photos of her. You asked Dr. Lapido a number of very straight questions. Did you get any straight answers?
We didn't get any straight answers from the Surgeon General. It was very frustrating, very upsetting. My colleagues and I came prepared to ask questions, not just about the COVID-19 pandemic, but about other health issues that happened and have happened across our state, whether it was the hepatitis C outbreak, issues relating to AIDS and HIV, disparate healthcare in our state. And we really didn't get any answers, whether it was about an employee of the DOH who was just suspended because of raising concerns of vaccination rates, to a very pointed question about vaccines and masks. We didn't get any answers. We got a lot of pleasantries and niceties, but that was about it.
Yeah. Well, and one of the most pointed questions and most important questions was, do vaccines work against COVID? Yes or no? Did you ever get a yes or no answer?
we got a lot of, as I said yesterday, a lot of words. But he meandered through it and said that there was some modest benefit. But the reality is, we know, and he said he likes to be guided in science, that vaccines work in making sure that the effects of COVID-19 aren't going to be as cataclysmic and may not result in hospital stays. I also asked very pointedly, does masking work to prevent the spread of COVID-19? Again, a yes or no question. We didn't get that yes or no answer from the Surgeon General. As we continue to press, I asked another very pointed question about some of the choices that he has made as it related to a colleague of ours who was suffering from breast cancer.
Polsky. Yeah.
Yes. When Senator Polsky was undergoing her treatment for cancer, she had a meeting with Dr. Ladapo, and she asked him to wear a mask because he refuses to say whether or not he's vaccinated, which is, of course, I guess, his right. But he refused to put on that mask and made some very disparaging comments and was very disrespectful to her and the Florida Senate as a whole. Very pointedly asked him if he regretted those choices. He refused to say whether or not he regretted those decisions. And quite frankly, we are the third largest state in the country. As the Florida Senate, we have the ability to confirm these positions. And we believed that this was a game to him. It was beneath the dignity of the Senate. And we had a lot of work to get done yesterday, a lot of bills on the agenda. And our constituents sent us here to do work. And so we weren't excited about playing any more games with Dr. Ladapo. And so we decided to abstain, walk out so that they could move on with the dog and pony show that was going on. And we could continue to do the business of our constituents.
Right. Well, would you say that his refusal or his evasiveness was simply his style, or was he really trying to obstruct this procedure?
I think I don't believe, Michael, that is a style. I think that when you ask very pointed questions, you should get answers. And when asked very directly and given multiple opportunities to answer a question, you answer the question that you're being asked, particularly in a confirmation hearing with multiple members of the legislature. Again, not just questions about COVID-19, but health disparities amongst the state, why the Department of Health is no longer putting up a COVID-19 dashboard. Senator Jones asked that question, not an answer that was direct again. And so when asked again to give pointed answers, we never got those. We got a lot of pleasantries, we got a lot of niceties, a lot of verbal jujitsu, I like to say, but no direct answers.
Right. Is the real root of the situation here the fact that Dr. Lampedo is ideologically absolutely in lockstep with Governor DeSantis?
Look, I believe that this is an individual who has a lot of answers that he has to give, not just the Florida Senate, but Floridians as a whole. 21 million Floridians deserve the top doctor in our state who's going to be guided by real science. This is a man who said that mask wearing was an extreme measure. This is a man who stood with Florida's frontline doctors who condemned common sense COVID-19 safety measures. This is a man who falsely claimed he treated COVID-19 patients, something that his former colleagues at UCLA dispute. And so we didn't even get a chance to ask some of those questions because of the games that he chose to play. It is dangerous. And this confirmation is going to continue to go through. It will go to ethics and elections and then to the floor. And we believe as a caucus, it's our job to point out the concerns that are very real. And yes, I do believe this is a political mouthpiece for the governor. If you look at Dr. Rivkes, who was here, who, as we were walking into a pandemic, we voted to confirm. Some of our caucus voted for him. Some of us voted against him. But as we were walking into a pandemic, we felt that we had a responsibility to stay with what we had, right? And we saw opportunities where Dr. Rivkes did stand up to the administration and make comments about mask wearing and the amount of time that we would have to be wearing a mask. And then you saw very quickly the administration ripped him off the dais at that point and didn't really let him speak after that. Yeah. This individual is side by side with our governor, spewing false information, and that is extremely dangerous to Floridians. And we believe, again, that 21 million Floridians deserve better from the top doctor in our state.
I know this is a sensitive topic, but images of you were hacked from your phone several months ago. A young man was arrested and is charged with a crime. Now you have introduced this bill.
On November the 12th, I had just dropped off my kids at school and was sitting at my coffee table doing some work. And I got a text message that said, "Is this Lauren Book?" And I said, "Who is this?" And they said, "Someone with a proposition for you," and then sent 2 photos to me. One was of a sunburn. The other was after a lumpectomy that I just had undergone in November. I immediately reached out to FDLE and they began an investigation. A sting was done and an individual was arrested and is currently out on bond. I am the victim of digital hacking, cyber stalking, and image-based sexual abuse. Not just images that were stolen from me and my husband, but also deep fakes that were created that aren't me, but are created. And you can use 3 or more images to create those things. It's a term now that I'm using is cyber trafficking. They're being bought, sold, and traded for online, and I have no control without my consent on the dark reaches of the internet. We know that this is happening not just across our state, across the country, and across the world, predominantly to women and girls. And we're working very hard to pass this piece of legislation so that if you knowingly and willfully not just create these images and sell them online or trade them online for some pecuniary value, but if you create them, that will be a crime. We have bipartisan support. I think another really important piece of the measure would change the definition of child pornography, right? Because child pornography implies consent, and we know that children cannot consent. But it's something that I never thought in a million years that I would be a victim of a sex crime again at this point in time in my life. But here I am, and here we are trying to make a difference.
Thank you to Senator Lauren Book. Up next, hundreds of neighbors woke up to messages of hate this week.
A first-hand encounter with the rise of anti-Semitism. That is what we're going to talk about next with our guests.
Just about this time last week, hundreds of people in South Florida were waking up to find packages like this on their lawns and their driveways, baggies filled with flyers, filled with anti-Semitic, hate-tinged lies and false accusations.
The latest anti-Semitic incidents brought instant disgust, confusion, fear, and a lot of questions. Mitchell Tapper is the head of security at the Jewish Federation of Broward County. Lonny Wilk is the interim regional director of the ADL Florida division. Lonny, great to have you back.
Welcome.
See you again. And Mitchell, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning, Glenna and
Mitchell,
Michael.
can we, I want to start with you because you had a front row seat to this. You got a call last Sunday from some of the people you know who found these on your driveway. I just want to throw out there that personally, I'm not going to be saying the name of this group because I just don't want to give it more attention and a platform than it already has. But you know about this group. They're national. They're prolific. Tell us what you know.
This group has been around for quite some time. They've done rides. They've done flyer distribution, not only here in South Florida, but across the United States as well. Their message is vile, anti-Semitic. And it actually puts some fear in the people who receive these.
Yeah. Lonny, talking about putting fear in people, I have to say that my wife and I were driving yesterday morning, Shabbat morning, by a couple of synagogues in our neighborhood. There were police cars stationed outside every one of them. And that's probably a good thing, but at the same time, you think to yourself, why in 2022 do we need police cars stationed outside houses of worship, Jewish houses of worship?
Yeah, we're in a very interesting and disturbing point in history where, look, the Jewish community across the country and right here in South Florida have experienced a significant rise in anti-Semitic incidents targeting children, targeting individuals, targeting houses of worship. In 2019, we saw nationally the highest level of anti-Semitic incidents that ADL has seen since we started tracking them in 1979. And in the following year, although there was a 4% drop across the country, Florida saw a 40% increase in anti-Semitic incidents.
And what accounts for that, Lonny? What accounts for that alarming increase in Florida?
I think one of the things that we saw, look, when the coronavirus pandemic hit, a lot of us thought that incidents of anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry would decrease because we had less human interaction. But we saw the exact opposite. We saw incidents of harassment, of vandalism in our state significantly increase. We coined and learned the term Zoom bombing, where we had a significant level of Jewish institutions being targeted on this Zoom platform. In fact, here in the state of Florida, one of the first Zoom bombing incidents occurred to a funeral. While a Jewish family was burying a loved one, while they were graveside, someone took over the screen and shared swastikas and Nazi rhetoric, and it's vile and it needs to stop.
Mitch, I want to talk about something that I found really fascinating this week. You have a background in law enforcement, and as horrible as people are finding these flyers and the speech and the venom and the hate and the possible danger, the police departments that are involved and the Miami-Dade State Attorney, we found hard pressed to find, and they're looking for what the actual crime is, because a hate crime in Florida has to be attached to something else first to elevate the crime. But the underlying crime here, and on the bottom of the flyers, it actually says these flyers were distributed randomly and without malicious intent, almost like a disclaimer, knowing that they could get around any kind of laws. What do you make of this? What is the crime? What can the crime be here?
Unfortunately, Glenna, this falls under their First Amendment right of free speech. The same First Amendment right that protects everybody else also, unfortunately, protects them. That doesn't mean that intelligence is not gathered, that just like any other terrorist group or right wing or left wing, for that matter, group that instills fear and promotes a message of hate, that doesn't mean law enforcement is not looking at them, waiting for them to make some mistake or commit some crime or violate some law. Again, the same message that protects. They don't go on people's property when they do this, and that makes it very difficult to prosecute. I do stay in touch with my local prosecutor's office when an alleged hate crime is committed, and I am trying to pursue anything that would elevate any of these to a hate crime.
So Lonny, can I just take that and follow up with you? So hate speech is free speech. And so with the rise of hate speech and anti-Semitic actions that comes under the First Amendment, what do you do with that? How do you, especially with social media? I read a headline someplace, ancient hate, modern medium. Social media has just exponentially made things worse. Disinformation, lies, conspiracy theories. What do you do with that?
So thank you for that. The social media and the platforms that we all use on a day-to-day basis have really amplified hate speech to a dangerous level. We know that rhetoric, that anti-Semitic or any other kind of bias-motivated rhetoric may not stay at rhetoric. It may accelerate to harassment, to acts of violence. And so we need to take firm measures against the spread of conspiracy theories, against the spread of hate. And what Mitch had mentioned earlier, that these individuals had used their free speech. Every single other person in our society also has free speech. So we can use our voices to denounce anti-Semitism, to denounce bigotry. And one thing I must say that we've, in the Jewish community, have seen frequently of late is we've seen significant levels of anti-Semitism coming from the left, coming from the right. We've seen anti-Semitism related last May to the Israel-Hamas conflict. We've seen a significant level of Holocaust comparisons to the COVID pandemic, to vaccines, which are all just vile. We need leaders, we need community members to speak out clearly and consistently as allies against anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism does not just affect the Jewish community. Anti-Semitism is anti-American. Homophobia is anti-American. Islamophobia is anti-American. Racism is anti-American. And we need to stand up for that American value.
Lonny, Mitch, we are going to take a quick break, and we will be back to pick up this conversation next.
Today on This Week in South Florida, we are speaking with Mitchell Tepper of the Broward County Jewish Federation and Lonny Wilk of the ADL about the alarming rise in anti-Semitism. Lonny earlier said that it's up 40% in Florida, anti-Semitic incidents over the last year. Mitchell Tepper, let me ask you, these flyers, as you well know, were distributed in Miami Beach and in the city of Fort Lauderdale, but then Glenna reported on this in several other cities around the country, the same flyers. So there does seem to be some organizational effort to do this. How big is this organization?
The group itself has followers, and they communicate with their followers. And whatever city, it's not always the same that they hit with littering these flyers around the United States. In select cities, I guess, where they have those followers. They're not always the same flyer. They always have a vile, disgusting anti-Semitic message attached to them. And this group also will do these rallies where they do runs in several cities and hang banners over overpasses and drive through touting their message.
And when you deal with this group, Mitch, and others like it, as we were talking about before, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is the fear that it will become violent, or is the fear more it will spur others to violence?
The fear is that it will spur violence. This group in and of itself is not violent. They come pretty close to getting in your face before they cross that line. But there are other incidents, for example, Colleyville, Texas, or other incidents even in South Florida where Jews have been attacked walking to or from synagogue. So when you have something that may be on its face value nonviolent, there is a hint of oh my God, what might happen next. So we try to step up, security in all the Jewish communities and institutions.
Lonny, you were talking about hate in all its forms: anti-Semitism, sexism, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia. Anti-Semitism, though, has a different component, because besides hate, there is a conspiracy theory component that makes it a bit more insidious. I wonder if you would address that.
Yeah, we've seen anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about Jewish power, about Jewish control of the media, of financial institutions, and much more. We've seen religiously based anti-Semitic conspiracy theories take hold. And the Colleyville incident in Texas is an interesting example of that, where allegedly, according to reports, the individual came to the United States and carried out the hostage situation because he thought that Jews controlled the U.S. government to be able to free a prisoner. And that just speaks to the level that which these conspiracy theories can, as Mitch was saying, the hate that these spread may not be on their face to the level of crossing the line into illegal issues, but they can take hold in some people and accelerate others.
You know, there isn't a lot of positive things to talk about here, except that the ADL, I know, Lonny, holds training sessions. I think you had 1,600 of them recently over the last year, you know, to teach young people and others, you know, about intolerance and about this kind of hate. And Mitch, I know personally, because I'm on the board of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center in Dania Beach, they have student awareness days every year, and Holocaust survivors sit down with middle and high school kids and talk about what it was like to be in the Holocaust. I mean, I think these are life-changing kinds of experiences for these young people, and we need more of them.
Well, Michael, this Broward County is the third largest area where Holocaust survivors are. And yes, that is necessary. And I have consulted personally with the Holocaust Documentation Center, as I do with the rest of the community. So getting the message out about that type of hate and what that brought, you know, in the Holocaust is very, very important to teach everyone, to teach in both the Documentation Center, to teach our kids, to teach people in general, because that message should never go away.
Lonny, I was on the ADL's website, just kind of scouting around for our conversation today, and I saw something that kind of stopped me in my tracks. The Center on Extremism, that is part of the Anti-Defamation League, is tracking more than 100 political candidates this year considered to be extremists. Give us some detail on that, please.
What we're seeing is that individuals who have espoused extremist ideologies from the left and the right have traditionally not entered the political sphere, and we are seeing a significant increase across the country of individuals that are affiliated with some extremist groups run for office, run for local and state offices, run for federal offices. And so we need to, as a society, as political, our political leaders need to push back and against any kind of expression of extremism and bigotry. That is not the way to lift up our society. And two other things that I would just want to make sure to add in terms of what people can do to push back against anti-Semitism. One, if you see any kind of anti-Semitic or other bias-motivated incident, if it is a crime or a potential crime, contact law enforcement. And it always reported to ADL at adl.org/report incident. And
give us number 2 in 10 seconds. We got to go.
In 10 seconds, we need to all advocate for the Senate Judiciary Committee to confirm Professor Deborah Lipstadt as the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. And we urge Senator Rubio as part of that committee to make that happen as soon as possible.
Lonny Wilk, head of the ADL, Mitchell Tapper, Security Director at Jewish Federation of Broward. Great to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Stay tuned.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you, Michael.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
We thank you for being here with us. Remember, we are online 24/7.
And remember, as always, stay informed, get involved. Hope you have a great Sunday.
And we leave you with an only in South Florida sign of winter. Very chilly times for iguanas, falling but not frozen.